So I think we have to address one of the elephants in the room, and that's um, racism, how the media portrays us, how we treat certain issues and discuss certain issues. Earlier today, there was a discussion in the group here uh, to do with Islam, and it raises some questions and some comments and some confusion. So I think we have to have that discussion. So the reason it comes up so much is because the Yellow Vest movement started basically because of the carbon tax and the migrant pact. Well, as soon as anyone opposes the migrant pact, the narrative has been set by our certain politicians, the media, the left, that if you oppose the migrant pact, you're a racist by default. There's no nuance. That's a huge problem in today's society. I see with social media and news media, and is there's no nuance to discussions. There's no distinction between different elements of an issue. It's black and white, and there's nothing in between. Nobody talks about those gray areas. I shouldn't say nobody. There are quite a few, but mainstream is all about sound bites, 7 seconds. That's all people can pay attention for. Yeah, sure. I'll try to speak up a little bit. Is that better? I think I had my finger over the mic. So there's there's never any nuance. There's never any real discussion. So as it relates to the Yellow Vest movement, of course, we've been accused of being racist, not only because we oppose the migrant pact, but because there is uh, people in on Facebook groups um, that do have racist ideology. There's no question about it. It exists. There are people that judge people by the color of their skin. We have to denounce that. We have to react to it. We have to delete those types of things. But we also have to, the flip side of that is we have to be able to have the discussion. We have to educate and inform people of the nuance of this whole issue, because there is. Now, in the United Vests that I admit on, we take a very clear stance: no racism, no violence of promotion, no promotion of political parties or uh, or groups of that nature. So that's all good. But then we have to determine sort of what racism is, because I allow the discussion of Islam, and I allow those posts quite frequently. I've deleted some as well, but we have to be able to talk about it. So the posts that I allow are simply links identifying what issue Islam or Islamists or what have you create in different parts of the world. The reason I do that is because the Migrant Pact and our sovereignty to determine who comes in and how many come in to our country is extremely important. We have to understand who's coming in. We have to understand why they're coming in. There's a lot of elements to this that need proper discussion. So within the issue, specifically as it relates to Islam, I like to define that whole issue, and it is an issue. And when I say Islam, and people say, "Well, why not Christianity? Why not Judaism or any other religion?" Well, because quite frankly, uh, most of the terrorism that we see around the world today is born from Islam. That's a fact, and it comes from the Quran and the Hadith. Those are unmitigated facts. And Islamic terrorism is by far the most prevalent when it comes to terrorist acts around the world. So that's why I'm focusing on Islam and as it relates to immigration. So the facts are, I like to break down into 4 parts. There's Muslims, there's Islam, there are Islamists, and there are terrorists. Those are 4 distinct topics under this umbrella. So the first, Muslims. I have personally, and this movement, generally speaking, has absolutely no issue with Muslims, with Muslim people. I have Muslim people next door. I have Muslim business associates. I have Muslim customers. Personally, I have no issue with individual people. I don't judge people by race, color, ethnicity, gender, sex, race, religion, at all. I judge people by the individual. And most people in Canada are the same way. Most people in this movement are of the same belief. I say most. There's a fraction of people that do otherwise, but I think in a lot of cases it's because they don't understand the bigger picture and some nuance. The same goes with the left. You know, as soon as you criticize Islam, you're a racist. Well, you're not, because as we all know, Islam isn't a race. So, Muslims, we can't judge individual people by the religion they follow. I'm sorry, it's just, that's my opinion, but I don't believe that we can, and I don't believe that most people in the movement do that. Muslim people simply follow religion. Now, there is some nuance in that as well. Their religion dictates that their life is basically the way of Muhammad and the way of Allah, and so their whole life sort of revolves around religion. I still, at that point, I have no problem. I have no issue with it. People can do what they want as long as that religion, as long as that belief doesn't affect me as a neighbor or as a business associate or as a citizen of my country. I don't care what you do. That's a person's choice. It's their own belief. Islam. So Islam is not just a religion. It's a political ideology. It's a law. It's a way of life, wrapped up in the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad. And so we have to be able to criticize Islam. We have to be able to criticize the teachings of Islam, because there's a lot of in there that does not conform with Western civilization or Canadian society, for that matter. It's just a fact. And it's not, an easy discussion to have, because it is sensitive. But we have to be honest. We have to understand what it is that we're talking about and what we're criticizing. We have to be able to criticize a set of ideas. And Islam is a huge amount of bad ideas. And I should be able to say that openly and be able to criticize that religion and how that religion impacts our country, right? Now, just because I criticize a religion doesn't make me a racist. It doesn't make me a xenophobe. It may make me an Islamophobe, which is a fake word, but it quite possibly makes me an Islamophobe. But so be it. I know a lot of people, myself included, that criticize Christianity. Does that make me a Christianophobe? Well, no, because that would be a made-up word too. But we have this narrative. Again, it doesn't mean, because I criticize the religion, it doesn't mean I don't like Muslim people. The two are separate. This is how I was raised. This is how Canadians were raised, generally speaking. We separate people from their religion. We can do that, and I think that's healthy. Just like we need to separate religion from politics and from government. We separate church from state, and I think it should be more separate. But that's, again, only my opinion. So we should be allowed to criticize Islam. And in that, I'm allowing posts on these groups because it's important to have that discussion. It's important to understand what's happening. Now we go from there, and I mean, I could spend 2 hours on Islam. I could spend probably 10 hours on Islam, but you get in the general point. Islamists. All right, so then we have another group here of Islamists who are supremacist in nature. They believe, based on the word of Allah and Muhammad and his life and his teachings, that Islam should be the only religion which comes from the perfect messenger who's speaking on behalf of the only God, Allah. Well, in Canada and Western civilization, we don't want a religious political ideology dictating to the rest of the citizens what to believe, how to live their life. Well, Islamists, that's exactly their motive. They want supremacy of their religion, supremacy of their beliefs, with no tolerance for anything else. I see Islamists as being the most dangerous, even over terrorism. As tangible and real as terrorism is, and obviously deadly, I think the overall impact is going to be far worse coming from Islamists than it is from terrorism. So that's, I mean, Islamists have, most of you are aware, most folks are aware that, well, I shouldn't say most, a lot of folks are aware of the agenda of the Islamists, and they want their worldwide caliphate, and they have their ways of doing it and growing and extending their caliphate, and we know what their goal is. So those are Islamists, and we have to be able to criticize that. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been told, I have on my Twitter, on my profile, that I'm anti-Islamist. I've been accused of being a xenophobe and Islamophobe and racist, I don't know, maybe 100, 200 times, just based on my profile, because I say I'm anti-Islamist. I asked them, tell me what an Islamist means. Well, it's a Muslim. Well, no, an Islamist is not a Muslim. All Islamists are Muslim, but not all Muslims are Islamists, right? So we have to be able to openly criticize and denounce Islamism. And then finally we have terrorism. Well, of course, everyone can denounce terrorism. Some people have a hard time calling it Islamic terrorism, or that most terrorism today throughout the world, 33,000+ terrorist attacks since 2000 are done by Muslims. Okay, so let's just say it. Let's just put it there. We understand it. We get it. We know where it comes from. We know what terrorism is and where it originates. So when we're talking about yellow vests and what we're posting and what we're talking about, we have to be able to be free to discuss Islam and criticize Islam, discuss Islamists and criticize Islamists, and of course terrorism. We have to be able to separate the discussion when it comes to individual Muslims. And so nuance, as I said before, is extremely important. We have to be able to recognize that on both sides of the fence. We're not racist for denouncing Islamists. We're not racist for criticizing Islam. We're not racist for denouncing terrorism, Islamic terrorism. We can accept Muslim immigration if we have control of our immigration, if we have control of numbers of immigration. And this isn't just for the good of Canada. This isn't just for the good of the people of Canada. This is also for the good of the people that are coming from these shithole countries. And I'll say it, they're shithole countries. They're coming here for a reason. They want to get away from where they came from these shithole countries that are totalitarian and supremacist in nature. They're leaving to come to a free and liberated country. We want to keep it liberated and free. We can't allow mass migration that is going to impact that freedom and liberty. And with that, when we accept too many immigrants from one religion, from one region, we can't manage them. We can't afford them. We can't support them through our social programs with the way we should be able to if we did it properly. So what happens is they end up in ghettos, and we've seen it across Europe. We're going to see it in Canada here too if we don't get a grip very soon. That isn't the best situation for immigrants coming to Canada. They're moving from one shithole to a ghetto in Toronto or Montreal, where they're living in maybe somewhat better standard. They're getting some social services, but in the end, if we're taking on too many immigrants, we can't support them effectively on the backs of Canadians who worked to raise the taxes to take care of people that we want to accept. Not to mention the ones that we can't take care of now, our own people that were born here and raised here and are Canadian. We have veterans on the street that are homeless throughout Canada. We have reserves that don't have running water, for God's sake. It's 2019 in Canada, and we have people that don't have running water. But we're going to take on millions of immigrants from around the world because the UN tells us to. So we have to be able to have these discussions, but we can't just blanket Muslims as being bad, as being, the problem. The people are just people. The Muslims that are immigrating from these places are just people. They've lived under a totalitarian regime. They live in shitholes. They get an opportunity. When our Prime Minister puts out a tweet saying, "You're all welcome, you can all come," well, if you were in any of those people's situation and you were given that offer, wouldn't you come? I sure would. For a better life, for my kids and my family, damn rights I would. So in a lot of cases, it's not their fault. It's not their fault that they're coming here and flooding our borders. So we have to put the target where it belongs. And the target is our government officials and the UN agenda. The UN, on the same topic, is full of Islamists. There's 193 countries make up the UN. 120 of those countries are part of a group called NAM, non-aligned members. That's 120. Not one is a Western Canadian or Western civilization country. Not one. The power at the UN is in that group and others. The OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, their motto, and I'll paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, is to look after Muslims first, to look after their well-being first. Okay? So they're part of this NAM as well, and that's 56 plus 1 countries. So where's the agenda? Where's the power in the UN? Well, it's not with the West, as people like to say it is. So all of these agenda items, including the Migrant Pact, including the carbon tax and Paris Accord, all come from Sustainable Development Agenda, which comes from the greater body of the UN, which is controlled not by us. So when our leaders go to the table at the UN to discuss, all of these things that we're going to do to fix the world because we're the UN, well, where's Canada's power in that? Where's our best interest? Our best interest isn't being represented. It may be discussed, but do you think the UN is there to make Canada a better place? No, their agenda, and they said it very clearly, is redistribution of wealth, to make every country around the planet equal. So what does that mean? Well, look how many poor countries are poor, like very poor, and live below anything that we could even dream of. Those number of countries far outweigh the countries that are wealthy, like Canada. But they want all of us equal. So how are they going to make those countries equal with us? Well, they're going to take from us and they're going to give to them. And they can do it because they have the power. So this all flows back to the UN. So at the end of the day, I don't want to get too wrapped up in that. That's another 2-hour discussion. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to criticize our government's affiliation with the UN. We have to be able to criticize policies that come from the UN and the Sustainable Development Agenda, which includes the Migrant Pact, which includes the carbon tax, which includes the new urban agenda, which includes a number of other policies. There's 17 goals that stem from the sustainable development agenda. So we have to be able to criticize this. We have to be able to tell our government officials to pull back from the UN, pull back from an unelected body dictating to us what our policies in Canada are going to be. We need to determine for Canada what's best for Canadians. We need to determine our immigration levels. We need to determine what tax we're going to pay, how we're going to address climate change, which is another whole debate. That could be another hour. But we need to determine that for ourselves. We don't need some unelected body with an agenda that doesn't suit Canada determining what our policies are in Canada. So, no, you're not racist for criticizing the Migrant Pact. You're not racist for criticizing Islam. You're not racist for criticizing Islamists and denouncing Islamists and terrorism. But do me a favor, don't just blanket all Muslims with the same brush, because they're just people coming from countries for a better opportunity. So that's where we need to delineate, draw that line, and try to be civil in these discussions as well. Because when we're sitting in these groups, I mean, there's people that come in and say outlandish things, they say racist things. We need to stay on top of that. But we also have to be able to do the other thing and speak freely without being racist and without being we just have to be careful in how we word things and how we approach this and how we look at it, because it does need great nuance and distinction. When the media in different times have asked politicians about this, politicians shouldn't answer, because it's an answer around this whole issue that takes a long time. And I've spent, how long has this been? Half an hour? And I haven't even touched on it. But so it takes long form discussions to really get a grip of what's happening with this issue. So anyways, that was sort of my discussion for tonight. I know I kind of rambled a little bit, but it's something that we all have to sort of understand and deal with, so we can have these discussions, but have them in a way that's respectful of everybody. And we can't just judge individual people based on what they believe or what they think or what they look like, but we can criticize ideas, and we have to be able to do that. So there has to be that line, and people need to understand that. The media needs to understand that. Our politicians need to understand that. And if we can do that, if we can get to that point of civil discussion and civil discourse, we're way further ahead, and this movement will be way further ahead. And so I guess that's all I wanted to really say about that. But we could sure have a long discussion about this whole issue, a lot longer than what I'm dedicating now. But so anyway, I think that's about it for tonight. Be cool.